If the idea of making changes or getting out of your comfort zone sends you into a mental tailspin of what ifs, then today's episode is going to be one you definitely do not want to miss. We are doing part 2 of our interview with Adam Jablin, and we're talking about all things around the fear of change. And that's coming up next, right here on Unshakable Habits. The right habits can help you have it all. More time, better health, improved relationships, and less stress. But most people lack the tools to stick with those habits long enough to see results. That is about to change. Welcome to Unshakable Habits with your host, Stephen Box. It's time to take your habits from unsustainable to unshakable. All right, welcome back. This is episode number 74 of Unshakable Habits. I am your host, Stephen Box, and today we are talking about the fear of change with our guest this week, Adam Jablin. This is part 2 of our interview, so if you missed part 1, definitely encourage you to go back and check that out. But like I said, today we're talking about overcoming the fear of change. And I know this is one a lot of us really struggle with because we get into that comfort zone. It is so much easier to just stay there, right? Than to actually try to change it, because changing requires a different mindset. It requires different skills. It requires a lot of things that sound like a lot of work. So sometimes it just feels easier to stay where we are. Adam, yesterday you were sharing a little bit about your story about how you were trying to do all the things. You felt invisible. You went out and you did all these things, and it prompted you to try to change, but you didn't actually make a change. You just did more of what you were doing. You kind of doubled down, which I think is something a lot of people can probably relate to. And then you had this intervention, and it came at just the right time. It ended up sending you into rehab. But I want you to take us back to that place, because I'm sure in that moment, the idea of completely changing, the idea of doing something completely different was probably a pretty scary thing to deal with.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying from the ground up. Look, alcohol, I had a spiritual relationship with alcohol and drugs. It was spiritual. Make no mistake. This wasn't like I like chocolate or I enjoy a cigar. It was spiritual. It gave my life meaning and purpose. I remember the first time I said I'm an alcoholic and an addict, this 600-pound gorilla jumped off my shoulders and I could breathe for the first time. And my entire life made sense. It was like the movie The Sixth Sense, where in the end, Bruce Willis finds out he's dead. And then the movie made it. I was like, that's why I got a DUI. That's why I wrote my wife 30 letters that I'll stop drinking. That's why I ran over the mailbox. That's why I almost slipped down the steps with my baby daughter wasted after a bath. Everything made sense. But then within a second, it went, now what? How do I watch football with my dad and the boys? How do I entertain customers? What do I do? It gave my life meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
There really is no pain in change. That's something I would want to stress to every individual. Our pain is the resistance to change. Our pain is the letting go process of the old ideas, the old beliefs, the old habits. But the actual change itself, there's no pain in.
Yeah. Guys, if you have the ability to write right now, I'm going to suggest you write that down, put it on the wall, look at it every day. Change is not painful. It's a mental thing. Yeah. The hard part is getting yourself to think differently.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? And that's why I think we've seen this rise here lately of a lot of talk about like smaller actions and compounding effects and things like that. And I think the reason why that approach can be so successful for a lot of people is it's not ask you to take the gigantic leap all at once.
No, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. As a matter of fact, a lot of times with my clients or my groups, it doesn't sound like the most, let's jump it down crazy, but let's dive in and conquer the world thing. But I actually tell them to lower the bar.
Yeah.
And the reason is that I want them to prove to themselves that they can accomplish tasks. Because we live in a day and an age, especially this era with social media and Reels and TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and whatever else is coming out, and now AI, that we all actually are dreaming big all the time.
Yeah.
We see people our age or younger or older living these monstrous lives, and it's just a clip and it's just a reel and it's done perfectly, but our dreams get bigger and bigger. But then what happens is they feel so unattainable because we're not willing to do those little things, that you start becoming a victim and you start blaming and you start comparing and you become resentful towards the world.
Yeah.
So I lower the bar and I show them, look, we can accomplish these little small tasks. And along the way, you're going to grow. You're going to grow. There may be some dips every now, and then you're going to hockey stick.
Yeah. So, Adam, when you think about this whole idea of the fear of change, I think you already hit on one really important point, which is that the change itself is not really painful. It's the letting go of. And you hit in your story there about you immediately started thinking, like, how am I going to watch football? How am I going to entertain clients? And these are things that when you really start to think about, I'm assuming that quality time with your dad watching football is really important to you.
Extremely.
And that taking out clients and entertaining them is really important for your business.
Extremely.
And so those simple little thoughts make it so easy to go back, right? What was it that helped you deal with that discomfort? And what was maybe the turning point that made you realize you didn't actually need alcohol to be a part of those things for them to be successful?
So what happened to me was I really had a spiritual experience, which was also at the same time a complete ego deflation.
Mm-hmm.
And I had two choices. I could go back and try to be that Adam, or I could go into this new Adam. Now, I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know if I had to wear robes. I didn't know if I had to wear a yarmulke. I didn't know if I had to be baptized. I didn't know if I had to do a vow of poverty. I didn't know what it looked like, but I knew that guy was sober.
Yeah.
And I jumped in with both feet. And that is one of my gifts. And that's also what I try to give to anybody I work with. When you're singular focus and singular purpose, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
When you're teeter-tottering, it's torture.
Yeah.
So what happened to me was I became so focused on what it was going to be to become well that I, rather than, it's a very cliche saying, I gave up the one thing to have everything.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than giving up everything for the one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase that.
But that's what happened with me. And I would like to find the right word, but I try to instigate, manifest. I try to create that feeling within my clients.
Yeah.
To me, because really what happens is they're divided.
Yeah.
And there's something of the old life that's really still compelling to them, but they're dying and craving for a new life.
Yeah.
And when I could get them to jump into that new life, then it's easy.
Yeah.
Then it's easy. So it's a letting go, it's a surrender, it's an acceptance, and it's tunnel vision.
Yeah. Yeah. The word that I think describes that is ambivalence, where you have two things that you want and they both seem really appealing and you're stuck between them, right? And you don't really know which direction to go in. And I think what you've already hit on here is this idea that the old way is really comfortable, is really easy to go back to, right? You're familiar with it. It doesn't require much thought whatsoever. Most of your habits around it are on autopilot if you just let them take over. And the only way to truly come out of that is to just get like laser focused and be intentional about this thing that you're trying to create.
Intentional, aligned, focused. These are great words.
Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody in terms of how to create that laser focus, because you're always going to have that pull, right? That there's that pull of go back to what you were into a certain point.
I like to make it really practical. If I'm working with a client, first we'll go over the causes and conditions of why we're sitting there. And when we're going over the causes and conditions, what it really does is it highlights the pain. But now let's also write out why you want to change, where you want to go, and let's get really focused on what that looks like. And once we build that vision, we can start backtracking the steps of how to get there. It's not going to look exactly the way you want it to.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, it's actually going to be better because we're very limited beings, very limited in our mind. It will actually look better.
Yeah, it's amazing. People talk about some people, like I myself, I'm a Christian, so I tend to give credit to God, but I know other people might just say like the universe or whatever. But regardless of what your beliefs are, I think there's this undeniable truth that when we start making positive changes and we start moving in the right direction, opportunities just seem to open up for us.
Absolutely. I'm a believer as well, and I'm open. So my God created the universe. My God created space and time.
Yeah.
But having said that, to find some form of faith or connection to something higher, many times when I'm speaking to clients and they don't have this language or they don't even have this kind of faith or belief, I start with things very practical. Like even this, man, like what we're doing right now when I was growing up is some Star Wars Buck Rogers nonsense. You know what I mean? This podcast, and there are planes that are flying over us right now, and the pilots are not even looking at where they're going. I know pilots. They're using nothing but radar solar, and they're talking to one another. You know what I mean? And there are whales speaking underneath the ocean. And there are whistles that only dogs can hear.
Yeah.
There are vibrations all around us. So to think that our perception, what our 5 basic senses can pick up on is all there is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So come to grips that you don't know.
Yeah.
You really don't know. And that will open up eternity to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, man. That's really good. Before we wrap up for this particular topic, if you were to tell somebody just one very small thing that they could go out and start doing today to overcome the fear of change, what would you tell them?
Dance with the thing that they're afraid of. Don't do it. Don't attack it. Don't dance with it. Dance with it. I really believe that the way we perceive life is how we're going to eternalize and internalize how we do life. So if you could see, okay, I'm afraid to start that podcast. I'm afraid to start writing that book. I'm afraid to put myself out there on social media. I'm afraid to jump out of an airplane. I'm afraid to swim with sharks. I'm afraid to drive race cars. I'm afraid, make it up. Whatever that thing is calling you that you've always wanted to do, dance with it. Look into it. Do the first thing. Look up where the closest skydiving place is, or do an indoor one. Dance with it. Write that first paragraph. Don't edit yourself. Don't judge yourself. Just write that first paragraph. Look into StreamYard or Livestream or whatever. Just start dancing with it. Look into it and allow this thing. Because if you try to do everything now, again, you could feel like the victim. It could feel too big, and it could feel like it's never going to happen. But a dance is beautiful.
Yeah.
Left, right, sometimes fast tempo, sometimes slow tempo, sometimes romantic, sometimes very masculine, sometimes very feminine. Dance with these goals. Dance with these dreams. None of us are that special.
Yeah.
Some of us are chosen, no doubt about it. I'll never be able to explain that Michael Jordan's brothers are all my height, 5'6" or 5'5" or 5'4", and the greatest of all time was born 6'6". Some of us have a chosen God-given ability, and we all do. But none of us are that special.
Right.
It still takes effort.
Yeah. And honestly, the fact that none of us are that special is really the best part, right? Because it just goes to show that with the right systems and the right tools, that anybody can be successful.
Absolutely.
My favorite. Now, I agree with you. MJ's the GOAT, but I grew up a Lakers fan.
Let's start with me, bro.
Kobe is my all-time favorite player. Okay.
I'm fine with that. I thought you were going a different direction.
No, I remember reading about in high school how Kobe would show up 2-3 hours before the rest of the team, and he's in the gym in the dark shooting.
Yeah.
And even once he was in the NBA, like, he would show up and he'd spend an hour doing like basic drills that he's done a million times that he doesn't really need to necessarily practice, but he understood this concept of I'm only as good as I am because I'm constantly reinforcing who I am.
Yeah, the basics.
Yeah.
For me, and I think this speaks to Kobe's legacy, I almost feel like you can't bring up MJ without Kobe, and you can't bring up Kobe without MJ.
Yeah.
It was a true passing of the torch. It really was a 1A and a 1B. Michael has gone on record saying he worked harder than me.
Yeah.
So, but there's something to both the men and both philosophies.
Yes.
Tim Grover went on record saying the gift about Michael is that once he trusted you, he didn't need to know everything, and he knew how to relax and let go.
Yeah.
He had to get away from the game. He'd have a cigar. He'd go play golf. He knew, and Kobe was Mamba mentality.
Yeah.
And they're just one ring difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So find what works with you. One is not better than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I would say in this instance, because we were talking about this overcoming the fear of change, it is probably best to start smaller if that fear exists, right? If you have that fear of change, start small. Like Adam said, dance with it, sample it. If you were trying to bring a new meal, you're probably not going to dive in and start shoveling loads of it into your mouth at one time. You're probably going to take one little small bite and see if you even like it, right? And I love that advice that you gave of just try it out. See what it feels like. You don't have to go do it if it doesn't feel like the right fit, but rather than worry about it and stress over it, why not just see what it's about? Get a sample.
Dude, let them enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Let them enjoy the process. If it could go from fear of change to enjoying the change, then the shift happens very rapidly.
Yeah. I love it, man. That's great advice. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about kind of the opposite end of the spectrum here, which is the fear of success. And this is one that I think a lot of people will struggle with that maybe aren't even aware that they're struggling with it. So looking forward to that conversation tomorrow. As always, I want to remind everyone that while none of us are born unshakable, we can all become unshakable.